Pokemon cards are flying off the shelves right now, and I have to know, is this stupid cat gonna knock off the stock market? Welcome traders, both of stocks and cards, to the newest episode of Crystal Crown, the show that answers questions you never thought you had. Want to know a little secret about me? I am obsessed with card games. I got introduced to Hearthstone in high school, and it was love at first top deck. That's all to say, I have my sights set on the Pokemon TCG recently. A few months back, I gave myself the personal challenge to see if I could get Arceus rank in my first month of playing live, finding Pocket not engaging enough, and using my trusty Great Tusk Mill deck, clawed my way up with a single day remaining left in the season to spare. Since then, I've been playing it passively, making sure to either retain my Arceus rank, or at least get close. It reignited my love for card games, and started a personal, new hatred for Chien Pao. This taste of the Pokemon TCG has opened up my eyes to the card collecting scene as a whole, and I was shocked with what I found. What used to be a niche hobby, maybe I watch a Max Mofo video opening up some packs in 2018, has absolutely exploded within the past 5 years, to the point where we're seeing Walmarts getting picked clean when Prismatic Evolutions came out. And those that weren't had people throwing hammer arms at scalpers like they were water types. Pokemon is the first TCG I've come across where people tell me they've never actually learned the rules to the game, and instead solely focus on collection. Why would you ever play that Moonbreon? It's only gonna lower the value of the card. That's right, for a lot of people, Pokemon cards have turned into a speculative asset. Let me break this down like an Oak tutorial in case this is your first time hearing about it. So in each Pokemon pack comes 10 cards, with one higher rarity guaranteed near the back. On average, you pull something simple like a regular rare card, but if you wished on a Jirachi or hung out with Victini enough, you can manifest one of the ultra rare cards. Modern chases often come as these beautiful custom art variants, like the Prismatic Secret Illustration Rare. Seriously, these colors are incredible. Or it's one of the older sets, where you just pull a massively sought after card. Base set Charizard being the most clickbaited example. In my opinion, there's a fair bit good and bad about the popularity spike. On one hand, since collectors usually only care about highly rare alternate art cards, this means that the basic versions used by people who actually play the game are dirt cheap and accessible to get into compared to other card games. On the other hand, the rise of greed from people picking entire stores clean of sealed product, only to turn it around and sell it at a marked up price to actual fans, is pretty scummy. I don't find fault in the idea of a card market or collecting, but since a monetary value has been attached, there's always going to be that one guy who's got a bathtub full of 151 when a kid wasn't able to get a single pack. So what does this have to do with stocks, you say, thinking I forgot the original purpose of this video? Well, I'm glad you asked, because while every kid told their parents growing up that their massive Pokemon collection would grow in value over time, no one really expected them to be right. As Pikachu continues to be one of the most recognizable mascots, these cards have seen their value only increase over time, be it nostalgia or the simple act of collecting. And with a massive boom period during the pandemic and a new wave within the past couple of months, prices have shot to astronomical levels, with the last set, Destined Rivals, being Team Rocket focused, and the black and white set releasing around the same time as this video, is rumored to have, and I had to double check this to make sure it wasn't some sick joke, about 160 illustrations. Collecting trading cards has never been hotter, and we should really start classifying Walmarts as PvP zones. But between each new set's illustration card being mistaken for a rent payment, to TikTokers putting the cash register noise over every single card in their packs, it got me thinking, should I skip the regular stock market entirely and just lean into the theme song of catching them all in this case being highly sought after cards? Through smart investing, can you beat the stock market's average rate of return with pretty cardboard? Or is this economy a bubble beam that people haven't noticed is about to pop? Anyway, so how could I possibly provide a satisfying answer to this prompt? Pokemon cards have all sorts of factors that affect their pricing, like grading that rates the condition level, error cards where the factory messed up, or specialty limited time promotions that prey on FOMO. Relying on individual cards doesn't paint the full picture, and the sealed box market is a whole other economy. What we need is to turn to the real world. What's their metric in determining the health of a regular stock market? Well, for the United States, that would be the S&P 500. The S&P 500 essentially uses the performance of the top 500 stocks on the Nasdaq to track the health of the market as a whole, as if the market is trending up or down, you'll largely see the same effects happening to the top dogs, as that's where everyone's money is tied up in. Man, if only there was an S&P 500 for Pokemon. where someone would track those top performing cards and use it to determine the whole health of the Pokemon economy. But that would take so much time to organize, like you'd have to find a website that tracks the price of each individual card, and then by hand go in and input all of the data over several days. And no one is crazy enough to spend all that time on a hypothetical. Anyway, so the S&P tracks the totality of the highest performing stocks. Our custom S&P that I made will do just that with Pokemon cards. To make sure I was being fair to every generation and expansion that's come out for the game, I took the top 4 highest priced chase cards of every set ever released to see how their stock has risen or fell over the past 3 years. I excluded any non-standard cards, things like limited time promotions, pre-releases, errors, shadowless, etc, etc, as I wanted it to be the case where if you were to rip into a pack today, this data would still be useful. Not that you went to McDonald's on the right day 13 years ago. My list actually comes out to be 461 cards, starting with base set and ending with Journey Together. While this doesn't roll off the tongue as nicely as 500, I felt like this was more than enough to establish a trend. So let's talk about what we found. But before I answer the main question and you click off this video with extreme speeds, let's talk a little bit about how each generation is getting priced. I did the bulk of my research in May of 2025, and for each ungraded card I tracked its performance for this month, the previous month, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and one secret metric that I'm saving for later. This is me setting up a verbal stealth rock, so don't say I didn't warn you. It's no secret that the first generation of Pokemon cards is ludicrously expensive, so you might be surprised to see these base set numbers be so low. Well, that's because the real money is in first edition, shadowless, and error cards in this set. But since this list isn't including those, just going with the regular ungraded pricing, we see the base set cards still go for a pretty penny, but far more reasonable than what you may have expected. This happens across the board for any of the cards designed during the Wizards of the Coast era. That's right, the people that are over there mixing up SpongeBob and Chocobos into Magic the Gathering were actually the first printers of the Pokemon sets, from base all the way to Aquapolis. While most base set cards hover around the $20 to $30 range, there are some standouts. Charizard, being the 90s sensation that he is, has 3 different cards topping the Gen 1 charts here, with other heavy hitters being Sabrina's Gengar and Rocket's Mewtwo. Speaking of Aquapolis, let's talk about Gen 2. As we get out of our first edition phase ending with Neo Destiny, we see a pretty major jump in price. Lugia from Aquapolis is our first card to break the 4-digit ceiling. Gen 2 had the advantage of stepping its game up in presentation. While Gen 1 is stuck with holo foils being the highest rarity, our Johto counterparts here have brought their A game with secret rares and shiny Pokemon cards. Things like the iconic Red Gyarados and a glistening Mewtwo dazzled fans, and their prices reflect that. Real 90s kids will be able to tell you about the yellow strip at the bottom being used in the e-reader. I had to do some additional research here because I only started playing during the best generation, 4. Love you, Llama God. If you were to swipe Pikachu like a credit card on this additional peripheral, it would unlock new content like cutscenes and these little Flash-style minigames. Each generation after it basically had a gimmick that would slightly shake up the formula. For time's sake, I'll run through them quicker than the first 2. Gen 3 brought us the EX era. EX cards are basically just super pumped up versions of Pokemon that, when you knock them out in the TCG, you take 2 prize cards instead of 1. A little risk for your reward for playing objectively stronger cards. Gen 4 had Level X and the Legend cards, with art so big it didn't even fit on the canvas. Gen 5 had started the popularization of full arts, both of Pokemon and trainers. Gen 6 had chromed out break cards and mega evolutions, which now cost 3 prizes, basically half your life total on 1 card. Gen 7 flipped a letter and called them GXs now, with a little dash of rainbows and friendship. Gen 8 went even larger with V and V Maxes, and finally Gen 9 introduced Terra Pokemon, the Master Ball sets, and started leaning even more heavily into illustration rares. But all that aside, let's pull this data together and start sketching ourselves a picture of how this market will look as a whole. So when you take every top chase card in Pokemon and average them out at the current price as of writing, it comes out to be $146.08. This is about a 2% increase from last month's price, being $143.06. Considering that the stock market only increases by 0.6 to 0.8% per month on average, Pokemon is experiencing a pretty nice payday. Comparing last month to last year, however, we get a jaw-dropping difference, with May of 2024's cost being $95.26. In less than a year, the cost of the entire chase card economy has jumped up by 50%, and looking year over year, it's at 53. This is something I sort of saw coming, as when you look at this graph across every expansion, no matter the generation, I would constantly be seeing these massive upticks within the past couple of months. It seems that the demand for Pokemon cards by people looking to use them in this way, or just general attention to the hobby at all, has risen to massive heights at the start of 2025, coinciding with the launch of two very popular sets, with Prismatic and Surging Sparks. Looking between 2024 to 2023, we see a much more reasonable rise of 4.25%. This actually falls below the average rate of return of the S&P 500 and perfectly exemplifies why I wanted to grab several points of comparison. If I were to just look at this time period, it'd be a no-brainer that you should stick with normal stocks. And if I were to be looking at the one before it, I'd be acting like a gold rush miner sifting through my local card shop for any hits I could find. Cletus, there be gold in these bulk cards! Now don't go listen to Jimmy Bob, he's been sifting through holofoils all day. Looking at 2023 to our last metric of 2022, it's another significant increase of 10.66%, which is another point in Pokemon's favor. Looking at this graph, it certainly seems like the line is going up and the Poke economy's got a lot going for it. On one hand, Pokemon cards from much older sets have a slim to none chance of getting reprinted. There's a finite number of those cards, and as the group of people that grew up with Pokemon, basically anyone 30 or below, start to finally have some disposable income, or at least a credit card to act like they do, they're looking to get their hands on some nostalgic art of their favorite little guys. Remember the saying, each of the Pokemon is somebody's favorite. So if a trainer in your life likes that one Furret song a little bit too much, they can find a card for Jesus! God, why is it so lifelike? It creeps me out. Get it off the screen. Okay, thank you. Wanting to tie all of our data back to today's price, here are some quick numbers that compare each point to our current day's amount. This means that from May of 2022 to May of 2025, the average chase card is now 76.89% more expensive, which in totality is a percentage increase that you will almost never see in the traditional stock market. But we can go one more level deeper. Now, I wanted to see how some of the most popular Pokemon had affected the market as a whole. I made two ETFs, or exchange trade funds, which in normal economics just serves as a basket of stocks all held together that track a similar goal. Sometimes these come in the form of tracking tech stocks like QQQ, or the oil industry like USO. In my case, I looked into Charizard and Umbreon, by far two of the most common Pokemon to show up on this chase card list. I mean, it's no wonder Charizard is quad weak to rock, because the amount of chase cards he has is sky high. All joking aside, the OG has 38 cards in our market. That means that despite there being nearly 1,000 options, old number 6 makes up a little bit more than 8% of the whole market. But what was more surprising is just how consistent this card has been priced over the last couple of years. While it experienced the same recent market spike as the rest of our S&P, the slow decrease in price across the first 3 years is what's very interesting to me. My running theory is that because everyone was chasing Charizard as the white whale during the 2020 craze, the price has reached an absolute high that is just not sustainable long term. We essentially hit a demand peak until the newest bull run. Or would it be a Tauros run? Now, on the opposite side, we have Umbreon. Look, is it a good Gen 2 Pokemon? Sure. Do I think that it's $1,100 good? No! Out of all the evolutions, Umbreon has completely captured the attention of collectors everywhere across its 16 cards. Looking at these charts, take the analytics from our traditional ups and downs from our first list and crank them up to 11. We see a pretty drastic rise year over year that's even better than our typical market. And with the last two sets to feature alt art Umbreons, Evolving Skies and Prismatic Evolutions, both clearing 4 figures, the average price is hitting a magnitude 10. So, is that it? Are all Wall Street traders just old fogies who haven't wised up to the fact that instead of stocks and bonds, we should be more worried about stockpiles and destiny bonds? Oh god, that's horrible. I need to rewrite that. Well, while coming across this data, I had a realization. Scalpers are morally bankrupt people, and I need to do my part in dissuading them the best way I know how. Alright, let's talk about the negatives. I hope you switched into your ground type, because here come those stealth rocks. Remember how I said I tracked one last category? Yeah, it's time to bring that up. Now, the website I got all my data from was pricecharting.com. Not sponsored or anything, they just made it pretty easy when looking up all the numbers. My only problem is that they only went back about 4 to 5 years in historic data. So the last number I tracked was just that, the earliest recorded price per each card. For those older than 4 years, this was usually around December of 2020. It was probably the most interesting data point I could have gotten. When you average out the initial of every card, I found the price to be $100.24. Big whoop, Tristan, I hear you say, in a tone that I don't really like. If you compare that to today's price, you still end up with an increase of 45.73%. And I would agree. But something I feel is worth mentioning is the difference in price between our initials and last recorded year marker, 2022. Between these two numbers, we see our first loss in price over the years. And it's not something you can just shrug off. It's a dip of 17.62%. In stock terms, if the increase between 2024 to 2025 is platinum, our starting price to 2022 is BDSP. Interestingly enough, when I went to look at historic drops in the real S&P year over year to find a point of comparison, 2022 was actually the best modern one. In a world where the stimulus of the US government's 2020 plans had faded and companies had grossly overestimated demand, we experienced a fall of 19%. I think it's important to relate this to more tangible things to make it clear, so let's look at the games industry, as this was the real start to the major layoff trend that's still affecting people in the field. In 2022 alone, there were 8,549 layoffs across the sector, which is almost 8,000 more than the year prior. This is all to say, things go dangerously wrong when we run into these kinds of downturns. Now, I'm not here to speculate, but I will caution investors that this recent run of sets seem to be spiking in price higher and higher. One of my local card shops was even selling a Destined Rivals ETB for 3 times over market price around launch. And I need to stress that the newest set, again, has 160 illustration cards. Depending on how crazy pull rates are, we're either going to see the current card trend completely bottom out or become a scalper's paradise. I think that the current popularity has a lot to do with cards just being in vogue right now, and we should expect a post-2020 loss in value to hit at some point. Speaking of taking a hit, I did mention that some of the older sets are free of reprints, but the newer ones are not safe at all. Basically at any point, Pokemon can just decide to open the floodgates for another round of reprints of a set, diluting the current rarity pool and undercutting the market. A good example of this is the Blooming Waters 151 set. See that massive gray bar there? That was a surprise reprint that tanked the price. These cards are also fully affected by the same kinds of ebbs and flows of the market, potentially even more since they aren't really diversified into several different industries. One of the ways a good stock portfolio protects itself is by spreading its money across several different types of companies. That way, if one takes a hit, Pikachu hasn't completely tanked your retirement fund. If we go back to our Umbreon chart and include this new figure, we see that it has a little bit more than a 55% decrease. This cat's air balloon popped by 2022. You can see that the more diverse option of the full S&P saves us from this particular change in demand compared to just one stock or Pokemon volatility. For cards, it's interesting because it's tied simultaneously to the popularity of the Nintendo IP, the interest fans have in trading cards, and those that are specifically collectors. If any of those take a dip, like if the general public loses interest in the hobby, you end up with Beanie Babies. You don't know what Beanie Babies are? Exactly! Card games across the board have been hitting frankly insane peaks, with Magic's newest collaboration with Final Fantasy being its best-selling set ever. Do you even have any idea how long that's been running for? I asked my buddy during its launch how prices were looking. The common play boosters were going for $6.99, while the collector boosters, with better chance for chase cards, were $34 MSRP, but market price was flying around $70. But that's not really the only downside. The copperaja in the room I've been mostly ignoring up until now is the whole additional risk you take when your investments are physical, tangible objects. To start, it's not like these cards are made out of the strongest materials. Despite our best efforts through sleeves and top loaders, cards can get damaged in a variety of ways. Hell, I bought myself a deluxe battle deck one day trying to get some of the essential trainers for my first physical deck to take to locals. And when I started streaming that night, I noticed that one of the holo foils had already started to bend. Simple things like rough handling and tears to the minute like sun damage, dust, or even finger smudges. Consider, little Timmy enemy could have pushed little Johnny over when he was opening a fresh new pack on the playground, and suddenly his initial college fund has just a massive crumple in the middle of it. The next big issue with physical assets is a little more Team Rockety. People might just try and steal it from you. Got a trusted friend that knows about your massive slab collection, and maybe some of those may grow legs when you're not looking. This is also a pretty major problem in the crypto space, with famous streamer Amaranth being held at gunpoint by robbers trying to steal her crypto wallet. This is something we just take for granted with our massive financial institutions. Also, your ability to sell is going to be way harder with cards than stocks. Say you want to pay a down payment for the house in the resort area, but if you try and offload your massive collection all at once, you may find people try to buy it in bulk discount or have difficulty finding buyers for specific cards. This gold suspicious food tin may have been worth $24 at one point, but good luck finding a market to offload your trash onto now. I understand this may all be a bit too hyperbolic of a negative. So what about an economy where there's no real governmental body regulating it? Well, you can get people trying to cheat the system with things like fake cards. One of the largest stories within the Pokemon card scene last year was the discovery of playtest cards for Gen 1. Playtest cards are essentially test runs companies like Wizards of the Coast create when printing the first set of the English Pokemon cards. They're highly sought after as they serve as an incredibly rare item with major historical relevance to the scene behind it. Well, it came out that many of these recent cards have been found to be printed in 2024. A scam where people were paying thousands of dollars for a fake with no historical significance. So maybe you just rifle through your old collection, which child you somehow kept in pristine condition all these years. The generation you grew up in matters a ton. For some inexplicable reason, maybe it's because the art isn't as good or there's just no demand, the top chase cards for Gen 4 are shockingly low. The most expensive card in the entire generation is Glaceon's Level X Ultra Rare for $165. Of the 60 cards included in this generation, a grand total of 4 of them have a price over $100. Gen 5 has 21 cards that hit 3 digits, but when nearly 2/3 of your entire chase cards get rivaled by the price of a fast food meal, it signifies we're dealing in penny stocks here. Finally, the last negative is a little bit more nebulous, so stick with me here. The last one is much more of a hidden risk. That is, of having an investor mindset. When doing research on the topic, I wanted to look up people that seemingly have made their bones in selling collectible cards. Alpha Investing is one such person I found, who had an interesting quote.
You all do know almost everyone around you in this hobby is not going to hold for 10 years. If you're between the ages of, 18 to 28, you're in your 20s pretty much, okay? The amount of life events ahead of you that you can't comprehend, you don't even have a clue the direction of your life if you're in that age range. You need to just be patient. There's tremendous opportunities, always. It's just a matter of you're willing to be patient enough.
I'll use my own experience as a final story. So while I was doing research for this video, the pre-release for Destined Rivals was announced. Wanting to get a head start at making a deck and meeting some people at my local card shop, I registered and made my way over. While I would love to sit here and give you all the details about me going 2-1 at my first physical card event, what really matters is that I pulled this. This is a Cynthia's Card Shop Secret Illustration Rare. It's the second most sought after card in the whole set, and since I pulled it during pre-release, it was so new that there weren't even any copies of it on eBay when I first looked up the price. I had no idea what to do, so after sleeving the thing and being more careful with it than I ever have with a piece of cardstock in my life, I took it home. I called up a buddy of mine who makes Pokemon card videos, shameless plug for the Snom Nom channel, and he told me to sell it immediately.
Sell it, please! It's only gonna go down from here, please!
His reasoning was that since I pulled it during pre-release, when any consumer could only have a max of like 3 to 6 packs, the total number of Garchomp SIRs in the world was at the lowest it would ever be with the highest demand. I followed my buddy's instructions and he was right. I did the smart thing and priced my card right in the middle of the pack, with one of the highest going rates being this one dude asking for $420.69. Classic. That being said, my card sold within a day, and all the other ones priced higher than me eventually had to pull theirs down, which I think means I made the most money out of anyone on pre-release Garchomps. Fast forward to the actual release day, and with the far higher supply compared to demand, HMO2 had to been used the way the offering price was cut in half. Now, could I have held onto the card? Maybe send it in for grading? I had it sleeved immediately after pulling it from the pack, so it was a pretty high chance it was a PSA 10. While all of this is true, it adds additional risk to your investment. You could be getting a PSA 10, but what if you got anything lower than that? You would have missed the boat on the highest demand for a less than ideal product. Maybe you want to save it long term, like any of those retro cards. Well, you can easily find yourself in the position of a Clefairy SIR, which has steadily seen its price in free fall over the last couple months. Now, all this being said, do you think mentally you'd be able to handle the turbulent ups and downs of a market like this? You wouldn't find yourself constantly refreshing the page, freaking out if your card was worth a cent more or less today than it was yesterday? One of the greatest advantages of the modern stock market is the level of participation the general world populace has over it means that people are far more comfortable just putting money aside and not paying excess attention to it. While I'm sure there are people that obsess the same way over their portfolios, it's far more common to find people that just routinely place money into their accounts and forget about it until the next time you need to send in a deposit. Frankly, you'll be forced to take a far more active participation in a market that's so volatile like the card one. I know I don't, which is why I sold mine in the first place. Now, I got considerable funds to put to a Switch 2, which is better for me since the next couple of Crystal Crown videos will all require me to get footage from those games. In the end, the central point I hope you take away from this video is this. Could you make money from Pokemon cards? Sure, it's absolutely possible. However, I wouldn't necessarily say it's easy. It certainly comes with a variety of risks and stress that is unique to this particular market. It's up to you to discern if you feel like you'd be able to make the right call and have the patience to weather the storms. For me, of the two most important cards I got that day, neither were the Garchomp. Instead, it was an Electivire EX, my favorite Pokemon, and a Great Tusk my roommate gifted me. The Pokemon I used to reach Arceus League for the first time all those months ago. Because these cards are worth a hell of a lot more when they come with some sentimental value. If you made it this far, it tells me you have the potential to make some really questionable decisions with your money. In this case, why don't you look over at my newly created Patreon? That's right, this whole video has been one brilliant plug. I just made one for this channel, and the first post will be a link to the full Excel sheet showing all the different card data points. I'll be providing updates for future videos there, polls on certain topics you want to see get covered on the channel, and you can even get your name said out loud at the end credits. For stretch goals, I have 2 other Pokemon scripts very close to being finished. So if you want to see more Pokemon content, head over there and help us reach the goal. And lastly, thank you for watching today's episode of Crystal Crown.